But while we're on the topic of Auburn, SEC basketball, it's been the talk of college basketball recently. I mean, this conference is absolutely insane. Half of the top 10 I mentioned is all SEC right now. And I believe, is it, how many teams are in the top 25 as a whole for the SEC right now? Is it eight or nine, I think, is in the top 25? I'm not entirely
Have
sure
to
on that
count
one. I'd have to pull this
3,
up, but I mean,
4, 5.
they're definitely a dominant conference right now. And I mean, there's been some people making early discussions on them possibly having the potential to be one of the best conferences in recent memory, but
I
we'll see
think
how
it's
that
8
pans
right
out.
now. 8
Eight,
SEC teams in the top 25.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's what I thought. But I mean, we're seeing people go out there and say that this conference has the chance to be one of the best in like recent memory, which we'll see how that progresses. We got to get into conference play first, but there's no doubt this is going to be an all-out war throughout the season. So, what better time than now to discuss our standings predictions for the SEC? We pieced together these lists prior to the podcast. And Blake, I'm going to start with you. Give me your standings. Well, actually, no, let's do this differently. We'll start from the bottom. We'll each trade off, but we're going to go together here. What do we think the SEC is going to look like, and who's your bottom team right now, Blake?
In a really deep SEC conference, I got to go with South Carolina. I mean, obviously it's really early, and these are just predictions. But I mean, they got blown out to IU, and any team that gets blown out by IU this year, I'm out on. So definitely going to go with the Gamecocks here.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I got South Carolina last. I mean, this could be a team, that if you throw them in another conference, they have a chance to, put together a decent performance and maybe kind of climb the ladder in terms of conference superiority, but not in this SEC. And yeah, I don't see the vision here for them. I think that they easily could be the last team when it comes down to the end of the regular season. Jake, I think you might be on board with us on this one.
Yeah, I am. South Carolina. I don't like their talent compared to a lot of other SEC teams. I mean, but that's to say, if you put them in like the ACC, they might be middle of the pack or so. But in this SEC, I'm not sure they can. I'm not sure how much damage they can do. Is what I'm trying to say here. So I got them
Yeah.
last for now.
Yeah, no, this is definitely a team where you throw them in a different type of climate in a conference. Maybe they make some noise, but not in this one. Moving into that 15th spot, I'll go ahead and lead it off here. My 15th team, if, these standings hold true, I'm going with Vanderbilt. This team, they're starting off good. They're 9-1. They picked up decent wins against TCU, Virginia Tech, Seton Hall, and then California as well. But I mean, relatively speaking, they haven't been tested yet, and SEC play is going to be a rude awakening for them, I think. I'm just, I'm not too sold on this team as a collective unit yet. Jake, yeah, I think you might agree with me on this one, but what do we think for your 15th spot?
I'm going LSU.
Hmm.
Um, no disrespect to Coach McMahon, but um, I just don't think they match up well against the rest of the SEC. They got a big win at Kansas State, or what we thought might have been big at the time, but Kansas State has also looked pretty horrible. Um, they don't really have like a super signature win like a lot of other SEC teams do. Um, beating Central Florida was a good win, but besides that, really nothing. So I have them at 15th.
Blake, how about you? What's your number 15?
I'm with Jake on this one. I got LSU. I mean, they got quality players. They got like 4 or 5 double digits points per game scores, but I mean, compared to some of these other teams in the SEC, I just don't think they shape up better than those other teams.
Yeah, no. And then for the number 14 spot, for me personally, this is where I went LSU. And I mean, that's not really to say that I think they're going to be a better team than like Vandy and South Carolina, but I also just think, the bottom of the SEC, you can really just, throw a dart at the wall and see who it is. I mean, this could really go anyway. LSU, they've got decent wins so far. I mean, UCF, that triple overtime game that we talked about on the podcast early on or towards the middle of November. They've got a win against Florida State and Kansas State as well. Losses to Pitt and SMU, but like Vandy, another team that's been relatively untested, they're not really going to have a test in terms of opponent until the 4th of January when they kick off conference play against Vandy. So we'll see how those two teams match up when the time comes. Blake, who's your number 14 slot here?
I got Vandy too. I mean, they've blown out a crap ton of teams. I mean, they beat Seton Hall by 16. I mean, they're a decent team. They beat VTech by 16, TCU by 9. And then they got, I think he's from North Texas, Jason Edwards. He's going off this year. It's like 19 points a game. So, I mean, I think just based off what I said, I still think that gives them the edge over the like LSU and Carolina.
For sure. Jake, what about you? What do you think?
Yeah, I'm going Vanderbilt. Mark Byington has done a really good job so far, 9-1 to start the season, but overall, I don't think the roster matches up to what a lot of other teams have. So, and it's not a knock on Vanderbilt, but I think it's just how it is. It's just a loaded conference. So, but Jason Edwards, star for Vanderbilt, might be on an All SEC team at the end of the season. He's been really good for them. But yeah, so I got them at 14.
Fair, fair. So moving on to the 13 spot. Jake, I'll let you lead this one off. Who's your number 13 team?
Yeah, I got Missouri here. They're coming off a big time win against Kansas, court storm and everything. But it's a trend with these lower ranked teams I have. I just don't think the roster talent is overall there. When you look at the conference as a whole, so I just have trouble placing them any higher. But Dennis Gates, I don't think he's gonna go winless this year. So 13th for them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for my 13 spot, I'm going with the Georgia Bulldogs, actually. I mean, that's not to slight Georgia at all. They've got a very talented player in Asa Newell. They got other dudes coming back that have been pretty solid for them, like Blue Kane. And they've got a solid, I guess if you want to call it a solid loss. I mean, no loss is really solid, but they did kind of fight with Marquette there, only lost by 11. They knocked off St. John's, and they also beat Notre Dame, Georgia Tech. So some decent wins, but Georgia basketball, I mean, they've never really inspired much in me in terms of confidence. So this is just kind of a team where I'm like, go out there and prove it before I buy into you a little bit more. So I'm keeping them down there at 13 for now. Blake, how about you? Who's your 13 slot?
I got Missouri, same as Jake. I mean, the team, they had a really big win against Kansas, but I mean, I still think that like they're not better than some of the other teams as of now. I do think that Illinois game coming up for them could be like really telling of that team. So if they end up winning that, then they could shoot up. But for now, I'm keeping them at 13.
Fair, fair. Moving on to the number 12 spot. Blake, I'll let you lead off with this one. What are you thinking at number 12? Who we see fitting in there?
I got to ride with the Bulldogs here. I mean, Asa Newell, he's having a phenomenal season. He's a really good interior scorer. I think him and some of the other pieces will be big moving forward. They only lost by 11, and that might seem, or they lost by 11 to Marquette. That might seem like a blowout, but I mean, a team that's not been like super talked about in years past basketball wise, minus Anthony Edwards year. I mean, that's a really good showing for them. And they beat a quality St. John's team. So, I mean, those two games alone and just how they overall have performed thus far put really has me thinking they're going to be the 12th spot.
Yeah, for sure. Jake, do you agree with him? You going with the Longhorns in the 12th slot here?
Yeah, I'm going with Texas here as well. They haven't really looked as good as a lot of people had hoped for to start the season. They got blown out at home by UConn just last week, I believe. They started off with a loss against Ohio State, who has not looked good at all recently. They don't really have a signature win yet. I mean, maybe you could call at NC State a signature win. I'm not sure, but it's not really super quality, I guess I would say. But they definitely need to get Tremont Mark back. He hasn't played at all. He's a big part of their team, so I got to give him some leeway here. Trey Johnson might win an SEC Freshman of the Year. I feel like he's the favorite if the season ended today. But yeah, they have a lot of way to go if they're gonna compete in the SEC for sure.
Yeah, I completely misspoke there. Blake put Georgia in the 12th spot, not
Yeah, I
Texas.
was confused for a
I
second.
was, that was my fault.
You're
I'll
good. You're good.
hand up there for the viewers. I was looking at my number
But
12
it
team,
set
which
me
is
up really nicely because I did have Texas
it
there.
did. It did. I gave you the quality assist, but yeah, no. Blake's going with the Bulldogs in the 12th spot. Jake's going with the Longhorns, and I'm going with the Longhorns. I was looking at my list, jumping the gun there, but I'm on board with Jake here. Tremont Mark, he needs to come back for them. Jordan Pope and Trey Johnson, that's a solid core there at the guard spot. I mean, we'll see how they emerge, and if there's talent on this roster. I mean, Arthur Kaluma, he's there as well. You've got a decent sample size in games that they've played. UConn, they weren't really ever in that game. They lost by double digits, but I mean, UConn, that's a high standard to compete against. They've got to win against North Carolina State. They beat Syracuse, but I mean, it's a relatively unproven team thus far. The only reason I'm buying stock in them at the 12th spot, getting closer to that number 10 range, is just because I think there's talent on that team, untapped potential that can be reached. And if they do, I think that they could get a little bit frisky there in the SEC and maybe claw their way up into like the, kind of lower part of like, the upper part of the bottom of the conference, maybe in towards the mid tier. But moving into my 11 spot, a team I'm a little bit more high on than you all. I'm going with Missouri. I mean, I like that win against Kansas. Kansas is a quality team. Obviously, we know the program that they are, and I'm buying. Maybe I'm buying a little too much into them. A little bit of fool's gold there, because I mean, other than that, they really, haven't been super tested besides their opening game against Memphis. But this is a team that is definitely not going to be as garbage as they were a year ago. So I'm liking what I see there. That core they've got going of Tamar Bates. He lit up Kansas. Mark Mitchell. He's a decent piece as well. I think there's pieces here that can make this team. That they could give a team a scare every once in a while. Nothing crazy, but I think that they're a little bit above those teams we previously mentioned. Jake, who do you have in the 11 spot?
Yeah, I have Georgia. I'm a little bit higher on them than you guys were. And that's because I think Mike White has his best roster he's had in Athens this year. Um, I just talked about Trey Johnson being SEC Freshman of the Year. I feel like if it wasn't to go to him, it would go to Asa Newell for Georgia. And he's been amazing for them. He's averaging 16 a game. Silas Demery in year 2 leading the way for the guards. They picked up Tyron Lawrence from Vanderbilt in the portal. So yeah, I feel like, and they have a big time win over St. John's too that I almost forgot to mention. And that's gonna go a long way in their hopes of making the tournament. So the 11th spot, I don't know. It almost feels like it might be too low, but we'll see how conference play goes for them.
I could see the vision there. Yeah, Blake, who's your 11 spot?
I'm gonna do a little bit of clip farming here. Hook 'em. Wait, I did that wrong. Hook 'em. I mean, they've had some quality games. The UConn game, I mean, they lost by 11, but I mean, they found them at the worst spot. That was after UConn lost those 3 games at Maui. And they also had another loss. It was against Ohio State, actually, first game of the season. So, I mean, that loss alone, granted it was super early in the season, but I feel like that's pretty detrimental. And my stock for them, I could have saw them at like the 6 or 7 spot preseason, but I mean, I feel like they dropped a few spots for me to put them at 11.
Yeah, for sure. Now we're getting into the part of this that's going to get a little bit more interesting, maybe a little bit more cause for conversation as we hit the top 10. I'm probably going to sound like a hater here, but my number 10 team is Arkansas. I don't see the vision with this team quite yet, being in the upper echelon of the SEC. I just think there's a lot of question marks. DJ Wagner, he just had a phenomenal performance against Michigan. That was a quality win for them. But is he going to keep being that kind of guy for them consistently, night in, night out? Boogie Flan, I think there's going to be growing pains with him as there is with any freshman. I mean, he's an elite talent. But some of these older teams towards the top, they're going to know how to kind of contain him, in my opinion, because he's a talent, but I don't think he's like the gym kind of talent that Cal is usually his forte when it comes to high school, like the elite of the elite guards. I think he's a very good guard. I don't know if he's elite. And then the question marks surrounding John L. Davis, just getting him involved. That's a guy that you paid a lot of money for. You expected him to be more of an impact player than he is. Not really getting a whole lot so far. And then, I mean, Adu Thiero, he's been a steady force for them, but I don't think he can be your best player on a team that wants to go far and be at the top of a very, very tough conference. Jonas Adu, is he going to be that force that he was at Tennessee? I mean, I know he's had the injury bug a little bit and he's trying to find himself again, but this team, me ranking them so low right now, is really just spawning off of a lot of questions I have about pieces that I'm not sure what they're going to evolve into. And then, I mean, I think you'd be remiss if you didn't mention Calipari's struggles in recent years. I mean, last year, Kentucky, that team, they had a lot of talent, obviously, and they were scrapping and clawing to get into the top 4 of the SEC towards the end of the season. It actually took that win against Tennessee on the last day of the regular season last year to get them there. And I mean, Cal at this stage in his career, what's he going to bring to the table? That's another question to me. There's just a lot of unknown and a lot of uncertainty with this team right now, and maybe I'll look like a complete idiot and the talent will prevail. But that's who I'm feeling at number 10 as of today. And Blake, I'll let you take the way here. Who do you think's your number 10 team?
I actually got Oklahoma, even though they're undefeated right now, sitting at 10-0. I mean, they played a lot of average competition. I mean, Louisville, they only put 69 points up and won by 5. They won by 5 to a really bad Arizona team. They won by 2 to a mid-Providence team. I mean, they blew out an Oklahoma State team who looks okay, but, I mean, nothing special. Other than that, I mean, the team, it doesn't really scream, like, elite almost, even though their record says right now they're elite. I mean, Jeremiah Fears, he's really good. But, I mean, that team, I'm just not completely bought into their hype.
No. Jake, how about you?
Yeah, I'm going with Blake here, going with Oklahoma at number 10. They won Battle for Atlantis. It's like really good non-conference resume. And so I was definitely favoring that when I was ranking them there. Because I think they were placed lower in the preseason poll. I could be wrong though, but
Yeah.
I got them firmly in like this mid-tier, in the hunt to make the tournament for sure. Jalen Moore is playing like an all SEC player for them. Jeremiah Fears looks like one of the best freshmen in the country, so they have a little good core here. And I feel like people have forgotten how good of a coach Porter Moser is in recent years, as he's kind of been rebuilding Oklahoma. But yeah, what he did at Loyola Chicago was spectacular. He didn't just forget how to coach randomly when he landed in Oklahoma. So yeah, I got him firmly at number 10.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm kind of switching gears here with you all where you have Oklahoma in this spot. I'm actually putting them a spot above. I think that I'm giving them the slight edge over Arkansas in the standings just because, I mean, they've proven it so far in the results up to this point. They haven't really, taken a bad loss as of now. And I mean, they're undefeated, aren't they? Actually,
Yeah,
now that I think about
10-0.
it. Yeah, they're undefeated. I mean, you got to give some credit to that. And I mean, Jeremiah Fears, he's looked like an absolute stud. You all kind of covered the pieces of that team that make them, like where we are right now in terms of the standings, middle of the pack. They're, I think, a safe bet to make the tournament at this point. But the reason I can't put them much higher right now is, I mean, when you're looking at the overall body of work, yes, they are undefeated, but their only really, I guess you could say best win is against the Louisville team. Was that the game that Pryor went down, if I'm recalling correctly? He went down early in that one.
I believe so.
Yeah,
Yeah.
against Oklahoma. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's their best win right now. A Louisville team that's obviously struggled with injuries. And the other wins they have, Arizona, we talked at length about Arizona earlier on, not super high on them at all. I just think this is a safe tournament team. I don't really see much of a ceiling for more beyond. I think this is a team that you could see in the round of 32, and that's it. And in terms of the SEC, I just don't know if they have enough to get them towards, that 4 to 5 range. But what do you guys think for this number 9 spot?
I'll go ahead and give mine, which is Arkansas. I flip-flopped them for what you had. I'm gonna trust in Arkansas's potential to improve a little bit more than Oklahoma, which is why I have them a spot above. But I'm really not that high on Arkansas at all. I don't think the roster meshes all that well. I know Arkansas fans have been going a little crazy about their shooting and taking some victory laps over them shooting like 37% from three or something on like just a little over 20 attempts a game. But so I mean, it's good for them. Boogie Flan is one of the best freshmen in the country without a doubt. DJ Wagner against Michigan, he showed what he can be, and he was really good for them. And a big part of why they won. He hit shots, he got to the rim, all that. Um, but my problem with them is that outside of the Michigan game, they haven't looked good against upper tier competition at all. They got blown out by Illinois, blown out by, or not blown out. Who else did they play? I'm blanking.
They got the loss against Illinois. They've got the win against Michigan, and then
Who
they
was
lost
before
to
that?
They
Oh
lost to
yeah,
Baylor.
Baylor. Yeah, they
Yeah.
didn't really look. They didn't even like look good against Baylor at all either. So they're 1 for 3 against Power Four opponents right now. I want to see them do more against Power Four opponents, but of course they have to play one before I can see it. But um, yeah, John L. Davis has to give a little bit more. Adu's getting healthier. He looked good against Michigan. Um, so I got them at 9, but I just John Calipari's teams have had in recent years, especially at Kentucky, they've had trouble on the road a lot of times, and he's seen a bunch of blowouts to his teams because of that. So I just want to see how he fares in one of the best SEC years like ever. So we'll see.
It's definitely going to be a test of what Coach Cal's still made of and how much he has left in the tank. But Blake, who are you putting in this spot?
I mean, Josh Hubbard, if you're watching this, I apologize, but I'm gonna go with the Mississippi State Bulldogs. I mean, they lost by 10 to a Butler team who hasn't looked the greatest. They struggled against a McNeese State team who, granted, is coached by a phenomenal coach who should be in Power 5 still, Will Wade, but controversy hit him. But, I mean, struggling
Strong
against a
ass
team.
offers hit him.
Yeah, struggling against a team like that, though, is kind of something that makes you stop and think. But I mean, I don't see them making a ton of noise this year compared to the past couple years that they have. But yeah,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, let's hope our boy Josh isn't tuned into this episode. He might be a little bit disappointed in you there, Blake.
that's all right. He's averaging 19 nearly a game. He'll be okay.
Yeah, if this Mississippi State team does have the struggles that you envision, it won't be on Hubbard, that's for sure, because he's been electric. Jake,
Yeah.
I'll let you lead off in the 8 hole here. Who do you got in that spot?
Number 8, I have Texas A&M, who we already talked about a little bit today. Wade Taylor, he makes them go. When he's on, they're really good. When he's off, they can look kind of bad, but they'll go as far as Wade Taylor takes them. But they have a consistent defense. You know what you're gonna get from them. Really physical, tough. It's never easy for the opponent. But yeah, they've done really good in the non-conference. I can't. You got to give them that. They have wins over Texas Tech, Purdue, Creighton, Rutgers. Almost beat, or not almost beat, but a loss to Oregon, who's really good. Win over Ohio State. They started off the year with a loss against Central Florida, but they've bounced back in a good way since then. So I got them at 8.
For sure. In my 8 spot, I've got the Ole Miss Rebels. I mean, this is a team that I think is going to be, decent. They're not going to make a ton of noise, obviously. I like what they've got in their backcourt there with Sean Padula, Dre Davis, and Murray. That's a solid trio they got there. Jalen Murray to round out that three. But they got quality wins up to this point. They beat BYU by double digits. That's an unranked BYU team, but a BYU team with some talent on the roster. They battled with Purdue, 2-point loss there towards the end of November. So they've competed with some of the better teams in the country so far. But in Louisville, they blew them out. That was after the injury bug hit Louisville. So, I mean, it's hard to buy a ton of stock into that win. But I just think this is a team that, they've got a kind of like a safe floor, but a low ceiling. And that kind of just puts them towards that mid pack of the SEC. Not really expecting a ton out of them, but I do think they'll be a tournament team, and they're going to be a team that'll cause problems on any given night for any SEC opponent that could spring an upset or two. Blake, who are you rocking with here?
I got to go with Pal's Razorbacks here. I mean, Adu Thiero, Boogie Flan, and even DJ Wagner. I feel like those three can be a compelling trio to watch throughout SEC play. They do need guys like Big Z and John L. Davis to really pick up production. I mean, they've had okay seasons, but I mean, when you're paying a guy a crap ton of money with John L. Davis, I mean, he can't be struggling somewhat as he has. He should be like one of their top scorers. He's sitting at fifth for points per game behind Big Z, DJ, Boogie, and Adu. So that's why I'm not super high on the Arkansas team right now. And I mean, they have struggled on paper against like some weak teams, kind of. And I mean, Michigan's their biggest win. So, I mean, if they can step up their consistency as a team, they could be higher. But right now, I got them at 8.
For sure, for sure. Now, getting into the number 7 spot, I guess I'll start it off here. I'm going to go with the Mississippi State Bulldogs. I had Ole Miss below them a spot. I think the Mississippi State is the better of the two Mississippi schools here. I mean, Josh Hubbard, we're obviously fans of his on the podcast, but I mean, even beyond him coming on here and chatting with us, he's a great basketball player, electric scorer, a playmaker. He gets to his spots. He's pretty decent at getting at the rim for his size as well, and he's got a decent cast around him. Riley Kugel, the Florida transfer, R.J. Melendez, he's been pretty solid for them so far to start the year. I guess a big question mark you could say for them is, what is the bench play going to be able to offer them? Because I think that starting 5 core that they have is pretty decent. You want to see guys like Claudel Harris, him take a step up there off the bench and keep delivering. He had a decent performance against McNeese, and he's averaging close to double figures on the year so far. But they've got, they've got the win against, what was it? I'm blanking on it. Pittsburgh. They blew them out in the SEC ACC Challenge. Pittsburgh, they could make the case that they're going to be a tournament team. Maybe not, but they've beaten SMU and Utah in close fashion. Butler, not really the best looking loss there. They took a L to a mid-major recently, North Dakota State, but that's a solid mid-major program. But Butler, you're better than that. And I think that Mississippi State, I don't think that they have quite what it takes to crack, the top 6 and getting into that 5-4 range. But I think they're going to be pretty solid and good enough to hit that 7 territory. They're going to be a tournament team. I could see them getting in as maybe like a 5 or a 6 seed. But Jake, what do you think about this number 7 slot?
Yeah, I got Ole Miss at number 7. I like how the backcourt is performed. Sean Padula, Jalen Murray, Matthew Morrell. Two of those guys have been in the program for at least a year now. They know what's going on. Sean Padula's come in. He's leading the team in scoring. Brakefield is still there doing his thing. Malik Diaz back in the SEC. He was at Vanderbilt before. Dre Davis. They got a nice little squad. But I just don't think they're in that upper echelon of teams that we're going to talk about in a minute here. So I got them right at number 7. But they blasted Louisville. That's probably their best win, I'd say, as of now, if I remember correctly. So yeah, I got them right at number 7.
Blake, what do you think to round this one out?
I mean, I feel like I've agreed with Jake a ton tonight, but I do agree. I got them at 7. I mean, they did have a really good loss. I'm not big on moral victories, but I mean, a 2-point loss to a Purdue team who's really hot at the time. I mean, that's really nothing to be upset about. And they beat down on Louisville, like Jake said, and also had a double-digit win against BYU, who's shown to be a quality team this year. So, yeah, I got Ole Miss at 7.
All right, and I'll let you continue it on as we transition into number 6. What do you think?
I got the Aggies here. I mean, Wade Taylor, yes, we've had a bunch of question marks and concerns about his consistency. But, I mean, if they're going to play like how they did against Purdue, with Wade Taylor not just being a scorer, but being a distributor, being a physical defender, you got guys off the bench and also in that starting lineup that are attributing some good minutes. And I mean, I really think that team can be good. And I definitely think that number 6 isn't out of question for that team.
Yeah, I'm like you, Blake. I mean, as much as I hate to admit where I'm wrong, I'm starting to buy in on this A&M team a little bit more. I mean, we know what Wade Taylor is at this point. It's not always going to be the most efficient, but I mean, damn it, he's an electric player, and when he gets going, like Jake said, it's hard to slow down. And I mean, even beyond just Wade Taylor, there's a decent supporting cast around them. Like I mentioned in the preseason that I don't buy them much as a tournament team, and I'm standing by that because the results back it up. But in terms of a regular season team, I definitely think that they're going to be competing towards, that top, trying to get that top 5 spot. I don't know if they'll crack it completely, but they've got a really underrated home court advantage when it comes to the SEC, and I think that might surprise some teams and get them a win or two that maybe they're not expecting. And I mean, even just when you look at the whole body of work of this team, Zurich Phelps, he's been having a good year so far. Pharrell Payne, we talked about him in the recap earlier. He's been decent. You got guys that have been in the program for a little bit now, like Solomon Washington. He's been decent. And I just think, Henry Coleman as well. He's a guy you want to see a little bit more out of. But they've got program guys on that team that have been, there, and they know what it takes, obviously. But I think that they're a safe bet for, maybe the 6 slot and maybe creeping into the 5 slot, nothing more. They're going to be a top 25 basketball team all regular season. Jake, what do you think for this number 6 spot? I know you're not buying the Aggies as much as we are, but who you got?
Yeah, I got Mississippi State, so we kind of flipped on Texas A&M and Mississippi State, but I just like the Bulldogs. I think Josh Hubbard is one of the best guards in the country. I know he was the first big guest on the Full Court Trap Pod. But outside of that, they don't get much more scoring. They only have 2 players averaging double figures this year. So yeah, you want to see a little bit more production. But I know they're really defensive minded as well. Chris Jans has them locked in on that side of the ball. So they've won a lot of games in the past by being super defensive minded. But yeah, Josh Hubbard has been going crazy. He can win you any game, literally. He's a flamethrower when he's on. And yeah, so I got them up number 6.
Yeah, I think this is the part where it's really going to start to get interesting because I think Top to bottom, there's decent teams when you look like six and below. Like overall, the SEC is very well rounded. Like they're really maybe you could only make the argument there's 2 to 3 bad teams at most. But I mean, as a whole, the league is solid. But this is kind of where you get to the cream of the crop. So to start off the top five, I'm going with a team that I was super high on to start the season that I'm kind of, a little bit less in on at the moment. Alabama, I got them finishing fifth. And this really isn't more so as a slight to them than it is just a testament to how the teams above them that I'm going to have here later on have been playing so well. Like Florida, I expected them to be a good ball club, but they look elite so far. And I mean, Kentucky, I might have had Kentucky in the 5 spot going into the season and maybe, swapped Alabama into a higher position where Kentucky might be later on. But, I just think that this team, the pieces are there. They're going to be top 5. And I think that they do have the potential for more if Mark Sears keeps doing what he does and being the kind of player he is. LeBaron Philon, you want to see him continue to grow and develop. They've got the pieces there with Grant Nelson. I mean, we're not high on him, but Jaron Stevenson, that's a guy that, he's back and he's got the experience. Then you need to see Cliff Omarui. You want to see him continue to get comfortable if you're a Bama fan because that was a big portal get for you. I mentioned how Chris Youngblood gets incorporated into this roster. Aiden Holloway, solid bench piece. I mean, this team, depth is not a question. It's more so just will they piece it together. They haven't really pieced it together as well as the teams that I'm going to have ahead of them have so far, and that's why I've got them sitting at 5 for now. But I could definitely see me being wrong and them fighting in that, top 3 range by the time we get to the end of conference play for sure, because I definitely think this is a team that's capable of a Final Four run again like they did last year and possibly even a national championship if the cookie crumbles the right way. But Blake, who is your number 5 team?
I'm going with the Gators here. I mean, good teams, they win even if they play with their food, but great teams, they don't keep the games close at all. And Florida's shown that they're, I'd say, a great team right now in college basketball. They haven't had a single game where it's been single digits for a lead. They've blown out South Florida, Jacksonville, Grambling State. I mean, they're not very good this year. But Florida State, Wake Forest, Wichita State, Virginia, and most recently, Arizona State. They won that game by 17. So, I mean, those are like quality wins against Power 4 schools right now. And then they got a pretty big game coming up actually tomorrow against UNC, who we'll probably talk about here in a little bit. But I mean, when they're blowing out teams like that, and they got guys like Walter Clayton, Elijah Martin, Alex Condon, and Will Richard putting up double-digit points. I mean, the ceiling is like limitless, to be honest with you.
For sure. Jake, who's your number 5?
Yeah, I'm going with Blake here, with Florida. He hit on a lot of the things that are going well for them this year, but just to name a few more, Walter Clayton Jr. is playing like one of the best guards in the whole country. He might be, I almost called him SEC Player of the Year, but that's definitely Janai Broom. But he'll be first team SEC for sure. Elijah Martin, he's playing like one of the best transfers in the country as well. That's a big time backcourt right there. Condon is super improved. Will Richard, or I think it's Will Reichert actually pronounced.
Reichert,
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Wait, he's only shooting 25% from 3 this year?
Yeah.
I'm just noticing it, sorry. But I feel like he's a lot better shooter than that percentage tells you. But so yeah, I have him at number 5 because I don't think they have a big time signature win yet compared to what the top 4 has that we'll be talking about. But they're undefeated. Todd Golden's doing a really good job. So number 5 for Florida.
Yeah, perfect segue for me. I've got Florida a spot ahead of you all. I think they're number 4. I just think, what Blake alluded to, it's maybe not the opponents that they've beaten so far that stand out, but just the fashion that they've done it. They've left no doubt all of the teams that they've played against, you could say, we use that expression, have a pulse. It's been double digits, never in question. And I just like the core that they've got. I mean, Will Reichard, Walter Clayton Jr., Elijah Martin. That's one of the best backcourts in the SEC. And it, I just really like what I see there because, Walter Clayton Jr., I mentioned him in the preseason. He's an elite scorer, elite shot creator, and he's proven it so far this season. He's averaging 19 a game. I look for that to continue as conference play goes on. I'm really excited for when they come to Rupp to open up conference play on January 4th. That's going to be a hell of a matchup. I'm definitely going to try and get into that one. And I think, if you have a question mark about this team right now, I guess it could just be the fact that they, haven't really been tested in a major way yet. But I just like the overall body of work of the team as a whole, the quality performances they piece together, and the roster pieces that they have. I mean, even beyond that backcourt they have, they've got Alex Condon, who's been a very solid piece in the front court so far. Ruben Chinyelu, I think I got that right. He's a decent piece. I mean, he's been a factor on the board. It's not really a guy that you're going to look to go get you buckets, but he's a good piece. And yeah, I just think that this is going to be a team that's going to make some noise, and I think they're going to reach that top four. I could see them even making a run for more, possibly, if they get hot, because, I mean, that's an elite offense that they can get going there when they're rolling. And I definitely see the potential for a big run in March when it comes down to it, and Nashville at the SEC tournament as well. But Blake, who do you got in the four slot? I think I might know who you have, but I'm interested to see if it's the team that I think you're going to roll with.
I got Alabama. I mean, their losses have been against quality teams like Oregon and Purdue. So, I mean, those losses really aren't a complete stain on that team. They got a ton of talent. I mean, we've talked about it a million times. LeBaron Philon, Mark Sears, Grant Nelson, Wright Sell before he went down, Aiden Holloway and Cliff Omoruyi. So, I mean, those guys are all really good pieces. But, I mean, I think it's good enough to put them in the top five and have them at the four spot.
All right, Jake, are you going to pick the Tide here as well, or are you going to save them for a couple spots ahead?
Yeah, I'm rolling with Alabama too, just like Blake. um, I already said a lot about them earlier, but I feel like they have a lot of room to improve. And they already had a big time non-conference schedule. They play a lot of good teams. They only lost twice, so yeah, they're still among the contenders within the conference for sure. Losing Right So was tough, but it is what it is. They have a lot of depth, so number 4 for Bama.
For sure. I'll let you keep things rolling. You can go straight into number 3. Who's your number 3 team?
All right, yeah, number 3, I'm going Tennessee. Currently AP number 1, but I just don't think they're better than the 2 teams I have above them. So, but I'll explain more with the top 2. So for now, I'll just say number 3 is Tennessee. Could easily be wrong. I could see them at 1 or 2. So yeah, that's what I'll say for now.
Yeah, Blake, those top 3 areas where things start to get really interesting because I think there's a group of, like we've been discussing, this Florida, Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, Auburn. You can really put them in whatever order, and I honestly don't think I'd be surprised just with how elite this conference is. But who do you think is going to start off your top 3 here?
I mean, I know I said I'd have the Wildcats as my national championship right now. Out of the week 6 top 12. But I mean, I got them right now at 3. I mean, that's not a knock on them at all. I mean, the SEC is just extremely tough this year. Best we've seen it in plenty of years. So, I mean, I'd say they'll get some fits from some top teams like Auburn and Tennessee. So, I mean, I do think they're top 3, and I got them at 3.
I'm on board with you too. I've got my Cats at number 3. I think that the potential for maybe the 2 is there, but I think there's one team that stands above the rest at number 1 right now. But if I had to just, kind of put a safe bet on it, I think 3 is a good spot for Kentucky. I think a big question for me moving into SEC play is how the front court play of Amari Williams is going to develop, because I think that he's a guy who can really make Kentucky go. I mean, he's a defensive anchor, and he kind of gets the, in that zoom action that Pope runs, he kind of gets things going sometimes. And he can be a little bit carefree with the ball at points. And I think that his continued development and how he adjusts from playing at Drexel to, the SEC is going to be interesting. I think that right now, really another important thing for them as they continue to get into SEC play is going to be, keeping Lamont Butler healthy, because we saw how important he is to this team. And if UK goes down another guard while Kirk Reese is out, that could really hurt them. But at this point, I think they've got a very safe floor at like 3 or 4 in the SEC, with the potential for a spot or two above if things pan out the right way and they get the best out of guys like Otega Oweh, Jackson Robinson, and Kobe Brea, other guys. I mean, that Kentucky team is deep, as is a lot of the top end of the SEC. But Blake, I'll turn to you now. We're getting into the top 2 here. We got 2 teams left that haven't been named, so it's going to be interesting to see what order they go in here.
Oh, my bad. I got Tennessee. I got Tennessee at the second spot. I mean, I just feel like their physicality is on a whole different level. And then they got Chaz Lanier and then Milicic. I believe just those 2 guys and the overall overwhelming defense that Tennessee plays with. I just feel like that puts them at the 2 spot. And like their home court advantage is pretty wild to see too. So I mean, I got them at my second spot.
Yeah. 2 teams left for me and Blake that we haven't talked about. Jake already threw one of them in there with Tennessee at the 3 spot. I think he might have a little bit of what we would consider a hot take for number 2.
Yeah, I'm going. Oh, you gonna go, Blake?
No, never mind.
All right. I'm going Kentucky at 2. I trust their scoring a lot more than I do Tennessee. They're leading the nation in points per game right now at like 92 a game, 91 a game, something like that. But I just think they have a much better resume than Tennessee as of right now. They've proven themselves against better teams, with wins over Duke and Gonzaga. Meanwhile, Tennessee hasn't really played as tough of a schedule. They just went on the road and beat Illinois, but overall, Kentucky has showed they can beat better teams so far. And I want to see it more of Tennessee before I put them over Kentucky. So that's why I have Kentucky 2 instead of Tennessee.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the main argument you can have for Kentucky being above Tennessee right now, is just, the lack of quality wins, if you want to say that, for Tennessee. I mean, they've been tested in ways, but as of now, they don't have a win over a ranked team. Baylor was ranked at the time that they beat them, but they've started to kind of slowly regress. We'll see if they can keep things going again. But I think this battle between the second and third spot all conference play long is going to come down to Tennessee and Kentucky. And I'm going with Tennessee for my personal number 2 spot. I like the roster Rick Barnes is constructed there, led by Zakai Ziegler, who's a defensive menace. He can give you some offensive moments at points, not the most consistent overall. And then they've got a guy like Chaz Lanier who can explode on any given night. Igor Milicic, he's been a solid scorer overall. And then you've got dudes like Jordan Gady, who just had a legacy performance against Illinois. If he can continue to step up in a bench role, that's a quality piece that you're getting minutes from off the bench. And they got a returner in Jemiah Mashack, who's been pretty solid as well for them in that program. I just like the roster that they've constructed, centered around bringing back some of their guys and also adding in some portal pieces. I think they're a team that's very physical on the defensive end and is going to get after you for 40 minutes any given night. And then if their offense gets it rolling too with Lanier, that's a hard combo to stop for sure. And then I guess that leaves one team at number 1 for all of us here. We got Auburn, War Damn Eagle. I mean, they're the best team in the country right now. They look like they're going to be the best team in the SEC all season long. We'll see how that progresses. Jake, what do you think is going to be the biggest key in whether or not Auburn does inevitably win this conference in the regular season?
I think just staying as consistent as they are right now. You can't like lose a beat from what they're playing like right now. They have the best shooting percentage in the conference. They're playing defense like Bruce Pearl wants them to. So um, their body of work speaks for itself. They're the clear best team in the country right now, and I think you just have to keep playing like they're playing. You can't let up. You have to hope to avoid injury. I know that's kind of a bad thing to talk about, but it's reality of the sport. So, um, yeah, and you just need Janai Broom to keep playing like the National Player of the Year, and they're going to be tough to take out from number one for sure.
Yeah, and I mean that is the reality of sustained success in the regular season. Injuries are always going to be a part of the game. One bad injury and it can derail what you're trying to do as a team. But I think the big thing for me that I want to see from Auburn, it might be a hot take because Miles Kelly and Denver Jones, they've been quality so far, but Tahad Pettiford, I think he's a dynamic scorer. I mean, well, we don't think, we know he is. And I just think he's capable of doing more than what he is in a bench role. I think he could really be elevated into that starting core and fit in nicely. But Bruce Pearl, he likes to lean on the vets. Denver Jones, Miles Kelly, I think they're going to be anchoring that backcourt for a while. And then you want to see Chad Baker-Mazara keep hitting his stride and sustaining that solid level of play that he's had. Janai Broom, I mean, at this point, there's nothing you can argue against for him being the National Player of the Year. He's that guy as things stand, and I would be shocked if he doesn't continue that way. I guess the only things that you could really question about them is, who's going to help Janai in the front court? Is Dylan Cardwell going to take a leap? I don't really think so. Is Chaney Johnson going to continue to be a piece that they can rely on off the bench? He's averaging like 9 and 6 so far this year, I believe. And yeah, I mean, this is a solid team top to bottom. There's really not too many holes on there that you can complain about, in my opinion. And I think that's just what's going to set them apart from the rest of the conference. And honestly, a lot of the teams in the country so far. Blake, I imagine you kind of echo that sentiment.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Janai Broom, when you got a guy like him who's really good on both sides of the floor, I mean, it just makes your team 10 times better. And then when your supporting cast is also putting in good minutes, I mean, it only goes to scream that they're like one of, if not the best teams in all of college basketball. So, I mean, yeah.
It's hard to argue against them right now, that's for sure, with the way they're playing. But that rounds out the SEC talk for today. I mean, I think we should clip this and look back on it towards the end of March and see how exactly this panned out, because this conference, it's going to be a war. There's going to be a lot of unexpected things that happen that we're not seeing right now. I already know. This feels like a league that has, random upsets written all over it. And a team could take a majority of their losses on the season, like a team like Kentucky that has one loss right now. You could see them slip up, I don't know, maybe like 5 to 6 times and maybe still compete towards the top of the SEC. I mean, that's just how elite this conference is, and we're going to see how it continues to evolve and if it truly is the best of the best.